I need to say this out loud, even if no one ever answers me. I need to hear my own voice admitting it, because silence has been my greatest accomplice. I didn't ruin my life in one dramatic mistake. I didn't gamble it away or burn it down. I did something far worse. I let it happen without me. If you had met me years ago, you would have thought I was fine. Not happy, not miserable. Just fine. I learned early how to look acceptable. I learned how to nod at the right moments, how to say I'm okay without lying technically. And for a long time, that was enough to convince everyone, including myself, that nothing was wrong. But something was always missing. Not in a loud way. It was more like a low hum in the background of my life, a frequency you only notice when the room goes quiet. I felt it in the mornings before work, when I sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing, already tired. I felt it on Sundays, when the day stretched endlessly and I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt it when people asked me what I wanted, and my mind went completely blank. I told myself that wanting things was childish. That real adults were practical. That dreams were expensive, risky, embarrassing. I said I would figure it out later, when I had more time, more money, more confidence, more certainty. Later became my favorite word. Later was safe. Later never demanded anything from me. Years passed quietly. That's the most dangerous way time can pass. There were no disasters to wake me up, no triumphs to anchor me. Just routines stacked on top of routines. Wake up. Work. Eat. Sleep. Repeat. I became excellent at surviving and terrible at living. Sometimes I would catch myself envying strangers. Not their success, not their beauty. Their certainty. I would watch someone laugh loudly in public, or argue passionately, or quit a job without a backup plan, and I would feel something twist inside me. Not admiration. Grief. Because somewhere deep down, I knew I was watching versions of myself that I never allowed to exist. I stayed in relationships that felt empty because leaving felt dramatic. I stayed in jobs that drained me because quitting felt irresponsible. I stayed in the same city, the same apartment, the same mindset, because movement required a decision, and decisions terrified me. As long as I didn't choose, I couldn't choose wrong. Or so I told myself. But there is a cost to not choosing. No one warns you about it. It doesn't arrive as punishment. It arrives as erosion. A little less curiosity. A little less courage. A little less belief that your life is actually yours. There was a moment, years ago, when I almost changed everything. I remember it vividly, which is how I know it mattered. I had an opportunity that scared me. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was honest. It would have forced me to admit what I wanted, and worse, what I was afraid of. I stood on the edge of that moment for weeks, weighing pros and cons like I was making a responsible choice. In the end, I chose comfort. I told myself it was wisdom. I said I was being realistic. I watched that door close slowly, politely, without drama. And when it was gone, I felt relief. That relief lasted exactly long enough for regret to take its place. Regret is patient. It doesn't rush you. It waits until you are tired, until your defenses are low. It visits you at night, when you replay conversations that never happened and futures that never existed. It asks simple questions that have no good answers. What if you had tried? What if you had failed? What if failing would have been better than this? I started noticing how often I used the word someday. Someday I'll travel. Someday I'll start over. Someday I'll be brave. Someday became a graveyard of intentions. Every unmade decision buried there quietly. People around me began to move on. They changed careers. They moved cities. They became parents, artists, entrepreneurs, versions of themselves I couldn't recognize anymore. They invited me along, sometimes. I always had a reason not to go. Money. Timing. Responsibility. Fear dressed up as logic. And then one day, I realized something terrifying. No one was stopping me anymore. The excuses had expired. The responsibilities I blamed had shifted or disappeared. And still, I didn't move. I had built my entire identity around waiting, and without something to wait for, I didn't know who I was. That's when the breakdown started. Not with tears or screaming, but with numbness. I stopped feeling proud of anything. I stopped feeling disappointed too. Everything flattened. Days blurred together until I couldn't tell you what I did last week, or last month. I felt like a background character in my own life, present but irrelevant. The scariest thought came to me one night when I couldn't sleep. It wasn't I hate my life. It was this might be all there is. Not because life is limited, but because I was limiting it. Because I was running out of excuses and still doing nothing. I looked at my reflection and didn't recognize the person staring back. Not because I had changed, but because I hadn't. I realized I had spent years protecting myself from risk, from pain, from embarrassment, and in the process, I had also protected myself from joy, meaning, and growth. That was the night I admitted the truth I had been avoiding for most of my life. No one stole my future. No one trapped me. I didn't lose my way. I gave it away, piece by piece, every time I chose safety over honesty. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The truth didn't change anything immediately. That's another lie people tell about realizations. They imagine lightning, clarity, sudden courage. What I felt was heavier. Knowing didn't free me. Knowing cornered me. Because once I admitted I had chosen this life, I couldn't blame it anymore. For a while, I tried to fix things quietly, small improvements. New routines. Productivity tricks. I told myself I didn't need to blow everything up. That I could rebuild gently, without frightening anyone, including myself. But every attempt felt cosmetic. Like rearranging furniture in a house built on the wrong foundation. The emptiness didn't go away. It sharpened. I started lying in more subtle ways. Not to others, to myself. I said I was preparing. I said I was waiting for the right moment. I said I was being patient. In reality, I was terrified that if I truly started over and still failed, I would have nothing left to hide behind. That's when the idea of disappearing first came to me. Not death. Not escape in a dramatic sense. Something quieter. A reset without witnesses. A life where no one had expectations of me, where no one remembered the version of me who stayed too long and wanted too little. At first, it felt like fantasy. Then it started to feel like relief. I noticed how often I imagined places where no one knew my name. I pictured myself sitting alone in cafes, walking unfamiliar streets, being invisible in a way that felt peaceful instead of lonely. I wasn't running towards something. I was running away from the person I had become. There was one person who almost stopped me. They didn't know they were doing it. They asked me a simple question during an ordinary conversation. Are you happy? Not how are you, not are you okay happy? I froze. My mouth opened, ready to say yes out of habit, and nothing came out. That silence lasted too long. They didn't push. They smiled gently and changed the subject. But the damage was done. Someone had seen the crack. And I realized how desperately I needed to protect it. Because if people started asking real questions, I would have to make real choices. So I began preparing in secret. I downsized my life slowly. Gave things away. Deleted accounts. Let friendships fade naturally instead of abruptly. I became very good at being unavailable without being suspicious. It turns out, most people don't notice when you disappear gradually. They assume you're busy. They assume you'll come back around. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. That everyone would move on. That this was my right. My life. My chance. But late at night, doubt crept in. Was this courage, or just another form of avoidance? Was I finally choosing, or was I still running from responsibility? The moral dilemma haunted me. Starting over meant abandoning people who trusted me. Staying meant abandoning myself. There was no version of this where everyone won. I had spent my entire life trying to avoid that kind of choice. Now it was unavoidable. The night before I left, I barely slept. I walked through my apartment touching familiar objects, trying to feel something definitive. Sadness. Fear. Excitement. Mostly, I felt hollow. As if the decision had already drained everything out of me. I didn't leave a note. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Words would invite explanations, forgiveness, guilt. I couldn't afford any of that. I needed a clean break, even if it made me the villain in someone else's story. When I walked away, there was no dramatic soundtrack. Just the sound of my footsteps and my own breathing. I kept expecting to feel panic, or regret strong enough to stop me. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar and unsettling. Lightness. Not happiness. Not freedom. Just the absence of weight I had carried for so long that I forgot it wasn't normal. For the first time in years, the future was empty again. And that terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me. I had erased my old life carefully. But as the days passed, a new fear surfaced. What if I didn't know how to build a new one? What if without my past mistakes, routines, and excuses, there was nothing underneath? I had escaped the cage. But I wasn't sure I knew how to live outside it. Starting over is not a sunrise. It's a long, gray morning where nothing feels earned yet. I thought leaving would immediately make me feel alive. Instead, it stripped me bare. Without my past roles, routines, and excuses, I had no script. Every choice, even the smallest one, felt exposed. I learned quickly that freedom is heavier than comfort. Comfort tells you what to do. Freedom asks you who you are. And I didn't have an answer. Days passed quietly. I became anonymous by design. No one expected anything from me. No one remembered who I was supposed to be. At first, that felt like peace. Then it started to feel like another kind of void. I realized something unsettling. I had erased my old identity, but I hadn't built a new one. I was still waiting. Just in a different place. The old patterns followed me. Hesitation. Overthinking. Fear of choosing wrong. Geography hadn't cured me. Distance hadn't transformed me. I was the same person, only with fewer distractions. That realization almost broke me. Because it meant I couldn't outrun myself. One night, I sat alone listening to the city breathe outside my window, and I understood the real tragedy of my life. It wasn't the years I wasted. It was the years I spent believing that one perfect decision would save me. That courage would arrive fully formed. That clarity was something you waited for instead of practiced. There is no moment where life announces itself. No bell rings when it's time to start living. You either step forward imperfectly, or you stay frozen perfectly forever. I thought about the people I left behind. Not with shame, but with honesty. I hadn't abandoned them to be cruel. I had abandoned a version of myself that was already disappearing. Still, the cost was real. Second chances are never clean. They always demand payment in guilt, loneliness, or doubt. Slowly, painfully, I began to choose. Not dramatically. Not bravely. Just honestly. I chose what felt slightly truer over what felt slightly safer. I spoke when silence was easier. I tried things I was bad at. I allowed myself to be seen without guarantees. Some days, I still wake up afraid that I've made a terrible mistake. That I've traded one quiet despair for another. But then I remember something I couldn't see before. Staying was also a choice. Waiting was also a choice. Letting life happen without me was the most decisive decision I ever made, and it almost erased me. This time, even when I hesitate, even when I fail, I am here. I am participating. I am no longer watching my life from a distance, hoping it will become meaningful on its own. If you're listening to this and you feel that low hum I used to ignore, don't wait for it to scream. It won't. It will fade you out quietly, kindly, while you tell yourself you still have time. You don't need to disappear to start over. But you do need to stop waiting for permission. That was the lesson I learned too late. And the one I live by now.